The mentorship session was being held in the same conference room where she had revealed her true identity 3 months ago. Now, instead of rigid rows of executives, the room held a diverse group of employees sharing experiences and learning from each other. As she took her seat, someone asked about the cleaning uniform still displayed in her office. "It reminds me of an important truth," she explained, "that sometimes you have to walk in someone else's shoes to really understand their journey, and that the best leaders never forget what it feels like to be invisible." Looking around the room at the engaged faces, young and old, from every background and department, she felt a deep satisfaction. The company hadn't just changed its policies, it had transformed its soul. That evening, as she prepared to leave, she received one final piece of news. Their new approach had caught the attention of industry leaders worldwide. What had started as one CEO's undercover mission was becoming a movement for genuine workplace transformation. She picked up her bag, pausing at her office door to look at the cleaning uniform one last time. It had taught her more about leadership than any business school ever could. Real change, she had learned, doesn't come from top-down policies, it comes from truly understanding and valuing every person's potential, regardless of their position or appearance. As she walked out through the main entrance, the same one now used by every employee, she smiled at the security guard, the cleaning staff finishing their shift, and the executives heading home. In their eyes, she saw something that hadn't been there 3 months ago: pride, belonging, and hope for an even better tomorrow. 3 months after the dramatic revelation, the company's headquarters felt like a different place entirely. The CEO stood at her office window, watching employees arrive for the day, and smiled at the visible changes below. The former service entrance sign had been removed. Now all employees, regardless of their role, used the same entrances. In the lobby, she could see the new chief of innovation, formerly the overlooked finance analyst, leading a morning meeting with a diverse team gathered around her. Her phone buzzed with the latest company newsletter. The headline read, "Mitchell Technologies named Most Inclusive Workplace of the Year." But it wasn't the award that made her proud, it was the real stories behind it. The morning's executive meeting looked nothing like it had 3 months ago. Half the faces were new, promoted from within based on talent rather than image. The young woman whose mother had been on the cleaning staff was now heading the tech division, already implementing changes that had boosted efficiency by 30%. "The quarterly numbers are in," the new CFO announced, sliding reports across the table. "Productivity is up 45% since the restructure. Employee satisfaction has doubled, and applications for positions have increased by 300%. "Tell them about the retention rates," the CEO encouraged. "Near perfect," the CFO smiled. "Turns out when you value people for their abilities rather than their appearance, they tend to stick around." After the meeting, she walked through the offices, noting how different everything felt. The rigid hierarchy that had once divided people was gone. In the break room, she saw cleaning staff chatting with executives over coffee. In the development teams area, she watched a maintenance worker offering valuable input on a new project based on his years of observing how people used the building spaces. She passed by the HR department, now completely transformed. Through the glass walls, she could see the new hiring process in action. Resumes were reviewed without photos or names, focusing purely on qualifications and experience. Initial interviews were conducted by panels representing different levels and departments. In the main lobby, a new installation caught visitors' attention, a wall of photos showing employees at all levels who had contributed to the company's success. Among them was Ming, now the head of facilities management, whose insights into building operations had already saved the company millions. The CEO paused at her old cleaning cart, now displayed prominently in the company museum alongside other important artifacts from their history. A plaque beside it read, "Leadership comes in many forms, never judge by appearance." Later that afternoon, she joined a video call with other industry leaders who wanted to learn from their transformation. Companies across the country had taken notice of their success. The key, she explained to them, was realizing that talent doesn't wear a uniform, either a janitor's uniform or an expensive suit. It's about what people can do, not how they look or what job they currently hold. She shared stories of discoveries made during her undercover time, Brilliant ideas that had been ignored, talented individuals who had been overlooked, and the countless small discriminations that had held people back. Our biggest mistake, she continued, was thinking we were already inclusive just because we had diversity initiatives. Real inclusion isn't about programs or quotas. It's about truly seeing and valuing every person's potential. As she ended the call, her assistant reminded her about the afternoon's mentorship session. The company had started a new program where employees at all levels could sign up to both mentor and be mentored, breaking down the old hierarchies that had limited people's growth. Walking to the session, she passed the security desk where 3 months ago she had been barely noticed as a cleaner. The same guard who had barely glanced at her then now ran an innovative security program that treated every employee with equal respect while maintaining high standards. In the elevator, she overheard 2 new employees discussing their first week. "It's different here," one said. "They actually listen to your ideas, no matter what position you're in." For those wondering about your own positions, she continued, ask yourselves this. In the past 2 weeks, how did you treat people you thought couldn't help or hurt your career? Your answer to that question will determine your future here. She picked up her cleaning uniform from the table. I'm keeping this as a reminder. A reminder that leadership isn't about titles or corner offices. It's about how we treat every single person in this company, whether they're cleaning our offices or running our departments. The room was completely silent now, every person processing the magnitude of what had just happened. "We have a company-wide meeting in 1 hour," she announced. "Every employee, every level, every department. We're going to talk about what real inclusion looks like, and then we're going to make it happen. Not with empty promises or token gestures, but with concrete changes and measurable actions." She looked around the room one final time. Those of you who still have jobs when this meeting ends, remember this day. Remember what happens when we let prejudice and bias infect our decisions. Remember what it feels like to be judged not by your abilities, but by how others perceive you. As she gathered her evidence files, she added one final thought. And remember that true leadership can come from anywhere, even from someone you thought was just there to empty your trash. The main conference room had never been so full. Executives sat stiffly in their usual seats, while cleaning staff, security guards, and other employees lined the walls. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. The CEO walked in, now dressed in her usual business attire, but carrying her cleaning uniform folded over one arm. She placed it carefully on the conference table, right next to her stack of evidence files. 2 weeks ago, she began, her voice clear and strong, I'd heard something in this very room that troubled me deeply. Rather than make assumptions, I decided to see for myself what was really happening in the company I built. She clicked a button, and the large screen behind her came to life, showing security footage from various parts of the building. What you're about to see is unedited footage from the past 2 weeks. But first, let's address what just happened upstairs. She turned to the SVP, who was trying to shrink into his chair. Would you like to tell everyone what you accuse me of, or shall I? The room was silent. She continued, a missing laptop, which has since been found in your car, exactly where I said it would be, led you to immediately accuse a cleaning staff member of theft. No evidence, no investigation, just an immediate assumption based on, she paused, what exactly? Their job? Their appearance? She clicked to the next slide, showing a series of emails and meeting notes. But that's just today's example. Let's look at the past 2 weeks. The evidence began to unfold. Security footage showed executives ignoring or dismissing cleaning staff. Email threads revealed qualified candidates being rejected for vague reasons. Meeting recordings captured casual discrimination wrapped in corporate euphemisms. During my time as Rose, she continued, I witnessed talented people being overlooked, hard workers being disrespected, and prejudices being disguised as professional standards. I heard every excuse, every whispered comment, every dismissive remark. She played a clip from a recent hiring committee meeting. The room squirmed as they heard their own voices discussing cultural fit and maintaining standards. Let me be very clear, she said, pausing the footage. This stops today. She turned to face the cleaning staff standing along the walls. First, I owe you an apology. I thought I knew what was happening in my company, but I didn't. Not really. You faced disrespect, suspicion, and prejudice while keeping this company running. That changes now. Next, she addressed the executives. Some of you will not be leaving this room with jobs. Those who have actively discriminated against others, who have deliberately blocked qualified candidates, who have fostered a culture of prejudice, your services are no longer required. She clicked through more evidence, timestamps, recordings, emails, witness statements. With each revelation, more executives sank lower in their seats. To those watching via livestream in our other offices, she continued, yes, this applies company-wide. Regional directors will be receiving detailed emails within the hour. The HR representative raised a shaking hand, but the stakeholders will be pleased to know that we're finally going to access 100% of available talent, not just candidates who fit some narrow prejudiced profile. She pulled up a graph showing company performance. Our competitors who embrace true diversity have seen a 40% increase in innovation and market share. Meanwhile, we've been rejecting qualified candidates because they didn't look the part. She walked around the table, making eye contact with each person. I've seen brilliant ideas ignored because of who suggested them. I've watched talented individuals being passed over because they didn't fit someone's image of leadership. I've experienced firsthand how differently people treat you when they think you're invisible. The young analyst from the finance department spoke up from where she stood against the wall. What happens now? The CEO smiled. Now we rebuild. Starting with promotions for several people in this room who have demonstrated incredible talent, resilience, and leadership, qualities some of us seem to have forgotten about while focusing on the wrong things. She began listing names and new positions, starting with Ming's daughter for a senior tech role, the analyst for department head, and several other overlooked employees for leadership positions. She turned to the gathered employees, her voice carrying down the hallway. I want everyone in the main conference room in 30 minutes. Everyone, including all cleaning staff, security, and maintenance personnel. It's time we had an honest conversation about what's really happening in this company. As she walked toward her office to change back into her CEO attire, she heard the explosion of conversations behind her. But she wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning. In her office, she sent a quick text to her executive assistant, start the live stream to all company locations in 25 minutes, and send me the complete file of evidence we've gathered. Looking in her office mirror, she wiped away the last traces of her undercover persona. The past 2 weeks had shown her exactly what needed to change, and now she had irrefutable proof of why those changes were necessary. She thought about Ming, about the rejected candidates, about every person who had been judged not by their abilities but by their appearance or position. Today, finally, everyone would see the truth, starting with a senior vice president who was about to learn a very public lesson about making assumptions. The next hour would change everything. She straightened her jacket, checked her phone one last time, and walked toward the conference room. It was time to show her company what real leadership looked like. The breaking point came on Thursday morning during what should have been a routine cleaning of the executive floor. The CEO, still undercover as Rose, was emptying trash bins when she heard raised voices from the senior vice president's office. "Someone has been in my office," the SVP's voice carried through the hallway. He stormed out, his face red with anger, clutching his laptop bag. "My laptop's missing, and I know exactly what happened." The CEO kept her head down, continuing her work, but her heart started racing. She had seen him leave with his laptop the previous evening, talking on his phone as he walked out. The security cameras would have caught that. The SVP's eyes locked onto her. Were you cleaning here yesterday?" "Yes, sir," she answered quietly, maintaining her role. "Standard evening cleaning." "Security," he bellowed, pulling out his phone. "I want security up here right now, and somebody get HR." Within minutes, the quiet morning erupted into chaos. 2 security guards arrived, followed by an HR representative. Other employees began peering out of their offices, watching the scene unfold. "This woman was in my office yesterday," the SVP declared, pointing at her. "And now my laptop with sensitive company information is gone. I want her searched. Check her locker, her bag, everything." The CEO stood still, her hands clasped in front of her uniform. She could feel everyone's eyes on her, their assumptions already made. This moment, she realized, was exactly what she had been waiting for. One of the security guards stepped forward, looking uncomfortable. "Ma'am, we'll need you to come with us." "Why?" she asked softly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Because I'm the most likely suspect." The SVP's face darkened. "Don't get smart with us. You were in my office, and now something's missing. It's pretty obvious what happened." A small crowd had gathered now. The CEO could see Ming among them, worry etched on her face. Other cleaning staff stood at the edges, their expressions a mixture of fear and resignation. They'd seen this before. "What makes it obvious?" she pressed, her voice still calm. "Is it my uniform, my job, or perhaps something else?" "This is ridiculous," the SVP exploded. "I demand you search her now. And check the security cameras. She must have taken it yesterday evening." A slight smile crossed her face. "Yes, let's check the security cameras. In fact, let's check them right now." Something in her tone made the SVP pause. She turned to the security guard. "Pull up yesterday's footage from this floor." "Around 6 p.m. should do it." The guard looked uncertainly between her and the SVP. "Do it," she said, and this time her voice carried an unmistakable note of authority. Using a tablet, the guard accessed the security feed. Everyone watched as yesterday's footage showed the SVP walking out of his office at 6:13 p.m., laptop bag clearly in hand, engaged in a heated phone conversation. The color drained from the SVP's face, but she wasn't done. "Now, while we're all here," she continued, her voice growing stronger, "let's review some other interesting footage. Last week, perhaps, when you told the hiring committee that a candidate was a no-show for their interview." She took out her flip phone and pulled up a video clip. "Interesting, since I have footage of that candidate waiting in reception for 2 hours while you deliberately ignored their messages." The HR representative stepped forward. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to." "To what?" she interrupted, straightening to her full height. "To know my place? To stay invisible? To accept being accused of theft because of how I look or what job I'm doing?" She reached up and removed her cap, letting her hair fall free. Then she pulled out her CEO badge from her pocket, holding it up for everyone to see. The hallway fell dead silent. "I think," she said into the silence, "we should continue this discussion in the boardroom. Right now." The SVP's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The security guards stepped back, their faces a mixture of shock and embarrassment. The watching crowd erupted in whispers. "And please," she added, looking directly at the SVP, "bring your phone. I'm sure you'll find your laptop in your car, where you left it after your angry phone call yesterday. Unless you'd like to search my locker first." She sent a secure email to her executive assistant from a private account, needing to preserve all security footage from the past 2 weeks. Every floor, every camera. Crucial evidence. Then she noticed something on her phone, a company-wide email about an upcoming board meeting. The topic? Maintaining corporate culture and professional standards. The very phrases she'd heard used to justify discrimination. She smiled grimly. They had no idea what was coming. That night, she couldn't sleep. She thought about Ming's daughter, the talented analyst, all the qualified candidates turned away at the door. She thought about the cleaning staff, treated like ghosts in their own workplace. She thought about every person who had ever been told they weren't the right fit or didn't have natural leadership presence. Tomorrow would bring more evidence, more revelations, more fuel for the fire that would soon engulf the comfortable prejudices of her executive team. But for now, she allowed herself to feel both anger and hope, anger at what she discovered, and hope for what she could change. As she finally drifted off to sleep, she thought about how people often say it's lonely at the top. But now she knew the truth. It's lonelier at the bottom, where talented people are invisible, their potential ignored, their dreams dismissed with a casual phrase about cultural fit. That was about to change. All she needed was a few more days of evidence, and then she would show them exactly what leadership really looks like. The second week of her undercover mission began with a knot in her stomach. The CEO had already witnessed enough to justify major changes, but something told her the worst was yet to come. She wasn't wrong. Monday morning started with a department head meeting she managed to observe while cleaning the conference room's glass walls. Inside, 10 executives discussed upcoming positions in their teams. She kept her head down, methodically wiping the windows while their voices carried through the thin glass. "I've got 3 senior positions opening up," said one department head, tapping his pen against the table. "Already getting pressure from HR about diverse candidates." Another executive rolled her eyes. "Tell me about it. They sent me this resume yesterday. Impressive qualifications, but you should have seen the photo. Can you imagine them representing us at the London office?" The CEO's hand tightened on her cleaning cloth. She knew exactly which candidate they meant. She'd reviewed the resume herself last week before starting this mission. The candidate had 15 years of international experience and spoke 4 languages. Later that morning, while emptying trash bins in the HR department, she overheard 2 recruiters discussing their methods. "Look, it's simple," one explained to a new hire. "When we get those kinds of applications, just wait 2 weeks, then send the standard position has been filled email. No drama, no complaints." "But what if they're qualified?" the new recruiter asked. "They're never qualified enough. Trust me, it's easier this way. Management doesn't want to deal with complications." During her lunch break, she sat with Ming again, who had become something of a friend over the past week. Today, Ming looked troubled. "Everything okay?" the CEO asked, carefully maintaining her rose persona. Ming hesitated before speaking. "My daughter graduated top of her class in computer science. Applied for an entry-level position here last month. Today, I saw her rejection letter in the outgoing mail while cleaning the HR office." The CEO had felt her heart sink. Did they give a reason? "The usual, other candidates better suited. She had a video interview last week. Funny how things changed after they saw her face." Ming's voice was quiet, resigned. "I wanted better for her, you know. Thought maybe things were different now. Guess not." Throughout the afternoon, the CEO gathered more evidence. She started noting security camera locations, times of conversations, names of people involved. Her phone was filled with quick notes typed during bathroom breaks, dates, times, exact quotes. While cleaning the finance department, she witnessed a talented young analyst being passed over for a team lead position. The analyst had just finished presenting a brilliant cost-saving strategy to her superiors. "Great work," her manager said afterward. "But we're giving the team lead role to Brett. He's got that natural leadership presence we need." The CEO watched the analyst's face fall slightly before she composed herself. "I see. Could you tell me what I need to work on for next time?" "Oh, you know, executive presence, confidence, the right image." The manager waved his hand vaguely. "Brett just fits the part better." That evening, while most employees were leaving, she cleaned the executive boardroom. The vice president of sales was still there, on a video call with his team. "Look," he said, unaware of her presence. "I don't care what HR says about diversity goals. I'm not changing my whole sales strategy to please some quota. Our clients expect a certain type of person walking through their door." End of discussion. The CEO paused her cleaning, pretending to focus on a stubborn spot while actually recording the conversation on her phone. One more piece of evidence for her growing collection. In the parking lot that night, she saw the young analyst from earlier sitting in her car, wiping tears from her eyes before starting her drive home. The CEO's hand twitched toward her real phone, wanting to immediately promote her, to fix at least this one injustice. But she knew isolated fixes wouldn't solve the systemic problem. Back in her apartment, she organized her findings. Her evidence now included recordings of discriminatory conversations, names and dates of qualified candidates rejected for suspicious reasons, documentation of unequal treatment and opportunities, patterns in promotion decisions, direct quotes from leadership revealing bias, security camera timestamps that could corroborate her accounts, written notes about daily incidents of discrimination. As she drove home that night, she thought about all the talented people who had been turned away, all the potential that had been dismissed with phrases like "not a good fit" or "not ready." She thought about the cleaning staff, treated like shadows in their own workplace, carrying the weight of constant suspicion and dismissal. Her own success story, rising to become CEO despite the barriers, had perhaps blinded her to how much hadn't changed. She had fought her way to the top, but what good was breaking the glass ceiling if you pulled the ladder up after yourself? In her apartment, she carefully documented everything she had witnessed that day, adding to her growing file of evidence. 3 days in, and she already had enough to justify major changes. But she needed more. She needed to understand every layer of this problem, every subtle way that bias crept into daily decisions. As she set her alarm for another early morning, she remembered something her grandmother used to say. Sometimes you have to go through the storm to appreciate the sunshine. Right now, she was in the middle of the storm, but she could see the changes needed to bring back the light. Tomorrow would bring more revelations, more evidence, more fuel for the changes to come. But tonight, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she was discovering about her company, about her colleagues, about the world she thought she knew so well. By her 3rd day as a cleaner, the CEO had settled into a routine that felt worlds away from her executive life. Her muscles ached less now, though the emotional toll was growing heavier. Each day brought new revelations about the company she thought she knew so well. That morning, while cleaning the conference room windows, she overheard a conversation that made her pause. A young black woman in a crisp suit sat across from the head of human resources, her resume placed carefully on the table between them. "Your qualifications are impressive," the HR head said, his tone carefully neutral. 10 years of experience, master's degree, excellent recommendations. But we're looking for someone who would be a better, cultural fit for our executive team. The candidate's face remained composed, but her hands tightened slightly on her portfolio. "I understand," she replied quietly. "Though I'm curious what you mean by cultural fit." The CEO watched through the reflection in the glass as the HR head shuffled papers uncomfortably. "Well, someone who would blend seamlessly with our current leadership team. We have a certain professional image to maintain." After the candidate left, the CEO continued cleaning, her movements mechanical while her mind raced. She had lost count of how many times she'd heard cultural fit in the past few days. The words had become code for something ugly, something she couldn't ignore anymore. During her lunch break, she sat in the basement break room with other cleaning staff, picking out a sandwich while listening to their conversations. An older woman was telling a story about finding a wallet in an executive's office. "I put it right on his desk where he could see it," she explained. "Next thing I know, security's calling me in because he claimed money was missing. They searched my locker and everything." "Was anything missing?" someone asked. The woman shook her head. "Course not. Later he found the money in his other pants pocket. Did he apologize?" "Nah. Just told security to keep an eye on the cleaning staff anyway." Others shared similar stories, missing items always blamed on them first, security checks that seemed to target certain staff more than others, snide comments made when executives thought no one was listening. That afternoon, while restocking paper towels in the ladies' room, she overheard 2 female executives touching up their makeup. "Did you see who they interviewed for the VP position?" one asked, applying lipstick. Bold of them to even try at that level." I mean, I'm all for diversity, but there's a reason certain people don't make it to the top." "Exactly. Can you imagine her in client meetings? Our European partners would have a fit." The CEO gripped the paper towel dispenser so hard her knuckles turned white. She wanted to turn around, to reveal herself, to demand they explain themselves. Instead, she kept her head down and continued working, recording every word in her memory. Later that day, she watched a scene unfold in the marketing department that broke her heart. A young cleaning woman was mopping up a coffee spill while a group of employees continued their meeting nearby, talking over her as if she were invisible. "These diversity quotas are killing us," one manager complained. "Last week they sent me 3 minority candidates that weren't nearly qualified enough. I had to interview them all just to tick boxes." "At least you got some options," another replied. "They're pushing me to promote someone from within. Like any of them are ready for management." The CEO noticed how the cleaning woman's movements slowed slightly, her shoulders tensing as she absorbed their words. How many dreams had been crushed in these casual conversations? How many talented people had been dismissed before they could even try? That evening, after most employees had left, she found herself cleaning the executive floor, her floor. Standing in her own office, now as an invisible presence, she saw everything differently. The photos on the wall of executive meetings, everyone smiling for the camera, but now she noticed the homogeneity. The awards for corporate leadership that suddenly seemed hollow. She opened her cheek flip phone and texted her executive assistant, "Schedule an all-hands meeting for 2 weeks from today, and get me everything we have on hiring decisions from the past 5 years." The CEO gripped her cleaning cart tighter, forcing herself to keep working steadily. Every instinct screamed to confront them, to reveal herself, but she remembered her mission. This was exactly what she needed to hear, the unfiltered truth. As the day wore on, she collected more than just trash and dust. She gathered stories from her fellow cleaning staff during lunch breaks, each one revealing more about the true culture of her company. She learned about the supervisor who always accidentally messed up floors right after they were cleaned, the executive who made racist comments when he thought no one important was listening, the subtle daily humiliations her cleaning colleagues had learned to accept as normal. That evening, as she drove home in her borrowed Honda, her body aching and her mind racing, she finally let the tears fall. Not from pain or humiliation, but from determination. She had built this company to be different, to be better. Somewhere along the way, despite her position at the top, an entire world of discrimination had flourished under her nose. But now she knew. And knowledge, she reminded herself as she carefully hung up her uniform for the next day, was the first step toward change. 13 more days to go. 13 more days to understand exactly how deep these problems ran, and what it would take to fix them. The following weekend, the CEO stood in front of her bathroom mirror, barely recognizing her own reflection. Gone were the designer clothes and carefully maintained appearance that had been her armor in the corporate world. Instead, she wore a simple navy blue uniform, the kind worn by thousands of cleaning staff across the city. She had spent hours practicing how to walk differently, consciously undoing years of posture training and confident strides. Her usual purposeful walk needed to become more invisible, the kind that wouldn't draw attention in corridors. Her hands, usually manicured to perfection, now bore clear nail polish and showed signs of recent work. She had spent the past few days deliberately routining them with household chores. "This has to be perfect," she muttered to herself, adjusting the name tag that read Rose. She had chosen the name carefully, common enough to be forgettable, yet personal enough to feel real. Her natural hair, usually styled professionally, was now pulled back simply under a plain cap. Her phone buzzed. A text from her executive assistant. "Security clearance and paperwork all set. You start Monday at 6 a.m. Are you sure about this?" She typed back a quick yes before setting aside her personal phone. For the next 2 weeks, she would use only the basic flip phone she had purchased for this role. Her regular phone would stay with her assistant, who would handle urgent matters and maintain the illusion that the CEO was working remotely due to family matters. The next morning arrived too quickly. She parked her old Honda, borrowed from her cousin, in the far corner of the employee lot, a stark change from her reserved spot near the entrance. The early morning air was crisp, and the parking lot was nearly empty except for a few other cleaning staff arriving for the morning shift. Her heart pounded as she approached the service entrance, an entrance she had never used before despite owning the building. A sleepy-looking security guard barely glanced at her new ID badge before waving her through. The difference in treatment was immediate and jarring. Just last week, the main entrance security team had greeted her by name and with warm smiles. In the basement-level break room, she joined a group of cleaning staff for morning assignments. The supervisor, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, barely looked up from her clipboard. "New girl, Rose, right? You're on floors 15 through 18 today. Shadow Ming, she'll show you the ropes." Ming turned out to be a petite woman in her 40s with kind eyes and quick movements. As they gathered their cleaning supplies, she offered quick, practical advice. "Executives start arriving at 8, so we need to finish the main areas before then. They don't like seeing us during business hours." The CEO felt a twist in her stomach. How had she never noticed this invisible timeline that kept cleaning staff out of sight? Ming continued her instructions as they rode the service elevator up. "Avoid eye contact with the executives. Some of them complain if they think we're being too familiar. Don't empty any trash bins if you see confidential papers. Wait and let security handle those. And whatever you do, don't use the main elevators or regular bathrooms during business hours." The CEO nodded, trying to process this parallel world existing within her own building. They started with the corner offices, Ming demonstrating the expected cleaning routine. These take priority. Executives check their offices first thing. Miss a spot here, and they'll call down to complain. As they worked, Ming shared more unwritten rules. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't touch anything on the desks. If someone important is having a bad day, make yourself invisible. The list went on, each rule revealing more about the hidden social hierarchy within the building. Around 7:30, early arriving employees began trickling in. The CEO watched in fascination as people she had worked with for years walked past without a second glance. One department head nearly bumped into her while texting, not even pausing to apologize. "You'll get used to it," Ming whispered, noticing her reaction. "Just keep your head down and keep moving." By mid-morning, her back ached from bending and lifting, and her hands were raw from cleaning solutions. She had never appreciated how physically demanding this work was. During a brief water break, she overheard two executives discussing the upcoming diversity initiative she had championed. "Just another PR stunt," one said dismissively. "You know how these things go. Make some noise about inclusion, hire a few tokens for the photos, then back to business as usual." The other laughed. "Well, at least it keeps the board happy. Speaking of which, have you heard anything about why our fearless leader is suddenly working remote?" As the sun set over the city skyline, casting an orange glow across her office, she began researching cleaning companies and their typical uniforms. She would need to transform herself completely. Her walk, her talk, her mannerisms. Everything that made her the powerful CEO would need to be carefully hidden away. She caught her reflection in the window, designer suit, carefully styled hair, the confident posture of someone used to commanding rooms. Soon she would strip all that away. The thought both terrified and excited her. That night, as she drove home, she found herself paying more attention to the cleaning staff in the lobby. How many times had she walked past them without really seeing them? How many others did the same? She had a feeling she was about to find out, and the answers might change everything. In bed that night, she couldn't sleep. Her mind kept racing with possibilities and potential pitfalls. But one thing was clear, she couldn't unknow what she had heard in that board meeting, and she couldn't unsee the truth in those employment numbers. Sometimes leadership meant doing the uncomfortable thing, the risky thing, the thing everyone else would call crazy. Tomorrow, she would begin preparing for her undercover mission. But tonight, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she was about to do. It wasn't just about exposing prejudice, it was about understanding it, experiencing it, and then using that knowledge to tear it out by the roots. She finally drifted off to sleep, knowing that in 2 weeks' time, her company would either be forever changed, or she would have the fight of her life on her hands. Either way, there was no turning back now. The warm morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Mitchell Technologies headquarters, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. In her top-floor office, the company's CEO sat quietly, her fingers drumming thoughtfully against her desk. She had built this tech empire from the ground up over 15 years, turning it into a billion-dollar company. But something wasn't sitting right with her today. Just minutes earlier, she had been sitting in what should have been a routine board meeting. Hidden behind her usual calm expression, she felt her heart sink as she listened to the subtle undertones in her executives' voices as they discussed the company's hiring policies. The words they used seemed careful enough on the surface, but she knew exactly what they meant by cultural fit and maintaining our professional standards. "We need to consider the company's image," one board member had said, adjusting his expensive tie. "Our clients have certain expectations." The way he glanced around the room, deliberately avoiding her eyes, told her everything she needed to know. Another executive had chimed in, "Maybe we should focus our diversity initiatives on middle management instead." The suggestion had been met with murmurs of agreement from around the table, as if they weren't talking about systematically excluding people who looked like their own CEO from leadership positions. Now, alone in her office, she pulled up the company's employee demographics on her computer screen. The numbers told the story that made her stomach turn. Despite her position at the top, the leadership ranks were still overwhelmingly homogeneous. She had always suspected certain biases were at play, but seeing the data laid bare was different. She reached for her phone and dialed her HR director, one of the few people in the company she truly trusted. "Can you come to my office? I need to discuss something important." 20 minutes later, they sat across from each other, cups of coffee growing cold between them. "I've been thinking," the CEO said, her voice quiet but determined. "Something's wrong with our culture, and sending people to more diversity training sessions isn't going to fix it. We need to understand what's really happening in our corridors." The HR director leaned forward, intrigued. "What are you suggesting?" "I want to see this company through different eyes," she replied, standing up to pace near the window. "Not as the CEO, everyone carefully watches their words around, but as someone they don't think matters enough to filter themselves for." "You mean?" "I want to go undercover as a member of our cleaning staff," she said firmly. 2 weeks, no special treatment, no one knowing who I really am. The HR director's eyes widened. That's quite a risk. The board would have a fit if they knew." "Which is exactly why they can't know," she smiled, but there was steel in her eyes. "I need to see the real face of this company, not the one they show me during scheduled visits and carefully prepared presentations." They spent the next hour working out the details. They would create a temporary position, arrange for minimal security clearance, and craft a believable backstory. Her executive assistant would help manage her real duties remotely, scheduling video calls for early mornings and late evenings. This could backfire spectacularly, the HR director warned, but there was respect in her voice. "Or it could be exactly what this company needs," the CEO responded, already making notes. "Sometimes you have to risk everything to change anything."